December 29th, 2014, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. There's snow on the ground, and people are celebrating the promise of a brand new year. But for two families, that fresh start would become an unspeakable nightmare. By the time the sun rose on New Year's Day, the city would wake to the grim aftermath of one of the deadliest mass murders in Alberta's history. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and fractured family dynamics. It's also a story of a woman caught in the chaos. This is Phu Lam and the New Year's Nightmare. Hey y'all, I'm kriscalvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back and Happy New Year.
Yes, happy New Year. Welcome. And for our friends all the way over there in South Africa.
Yes.
Wamokelekil.
Very nice. Our very first welcome of 2025.
For our South African friends.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are like you and love true crime can find us. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. And if you want true crime with us every single day of the week, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions you're in. Go join. I like to post all kinds of stuff in there, photos. Everybody's got funny memes in there. There's lots of good information.
Yep.
It's a great group of people. Happy New Year to the In-Laws and Outlaws. We love you guys.
Yep, we sure do.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link. If you want to send Rob some coffee, he drinks it every episode and will continue to drink it every single day in 2025.
At least one cup. At least.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes as well. It says, send Chris and Rob a text.
Yes.
And we love getting those.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting off 2025 with a New Year's murder. You know, I asked this question in the In-Laws and Outlaws. Do you want me to keep with holiday-themed cases? So we're starting off 2025 with a New Year's case.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, oh, gosh. And this one's rough. Let me tell you, it's rough. Wow. But it is in Canada, eh? And we do have listeners in Canada.
Did it take place in a house or a boat?
It was in a house.
Okay.
See, we can't make fun of Canada because I'm from the South. And so, you know, everybody's looking, it's a house. So, you know, what are they going to do?
One of my good friends is from Toronto, so I always...
So that makes up for it, right? If you've got a good friend from Toronto.
Yeah, because I always joked with him when he was talking, and it was like, something house. And I went, a what?
About the house.
Exactly.
They are the nicest people in the world. My quick story about Canada, I was there for a book signing, and I was at a McDonald's, and I asked for a Diet Coke with extra ice, and the guy put ice in my cup and then brought it to me and said, is that enough ice?
No.
And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so nice.
They're so kind.
Very polite. We love you, Canada.
Awesome.
Before we get started today, let me thank some sources. The Edmonton Sun, the Toronto Star, Global News, the Edmonton Journal, and Homicide for the Holidays.
Nice. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Phu Lam, and let me just say from the get-go, there are lots of Vietnamese names in this case, and if I mess somebody up, I apologize from the beginning. It's a brand new year, but it's the same old me.
Still got the same tongue.
I still have trouble with some of these names, so I apologize from the get-go.
No worries.
Phu Lam is just 18 years old when he leaves Vietnam after the Vietnamese War. He immigrates to Edmonton, Canada.
Okay.
And it's unclear to me if he came to Canada with his common-law wife, Chow Duong, Thuy Tran, she has 4 names,
Wow.
and a child, but he does have a common-law wife and at least a daughter from this first marriage or common-law marriage.
All right.
But life isn't easy for him. He was in trouble pretty much from the get-go. Starting in 1987, he's arrested for drug possession and gun possession.
Wow.
At some point, he splits from Chow Tran, and he's single and ready to mingle. But also, in his early years in Edmonton, he has a falling out with one of his friends, a man by the name of Duong.
Okay.
That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh. Scotty, you ready? Here we go.
And I didn't even whisper it.
I'll do it. That's called foreshadowing.
It was early. It's early in 2025, and I've already got pulling out the foreshadowing. But then in 2000, Phu Lam went back to Vietnam on vacation. He's now 39 years old, and this is where he meets Tien Truong. She is only 21, and she's working at a coffee shop.
Okay.
Now, Phu Lam isn't a wealthy man, but he is a Canadian citizen. And as he came by the coffee shop every single day to see Tien Truong, she's thinking that maybe he is her ticket out of Vietnam to Canada.
Ah.
Now, these two only knew each other for like 3 or 4 weeks. These 3 or 4 weeks that Phu Lam was in town. But when he returned home to Edmonton, they stay in touch by talking on the phone.
$3.10 charge for a long-distance telephone call.
I don't want to know what that phone bill was.
I remember in my 20s and 30s, long-distance calls were just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
We don't even know what a long distance call is now, right?
Yep.
Or this is an international call, so because
Yeah.
he's in Canada.
Yep.
But they fall in love, and 6 months later, Phu Lam went back to Vietnam where he married Tien Truong.
Okay.
In 2003, she finally arrived in Canada, sponsored as his wife. Now, at first, these two have a lovely marriage, and Phu Lam takes really good care of her. But he soon became controlling. He would take away her cell phone. He would refuse to allow her to see her friends. And he wouldn't let her work if she wasn't doing exactly what he wanted her to do. He's controlling.
He is the asshole of an asshole's asshole.
Wow.
And eventually this is going to become abusive, according to Tien herself. He's a control freak.
Okay.
Then somewhere in this early timeline of the first 3 years, Tien strays from their marriage with a friend of her family's. And 3 years later, in 2006, Tien gives birth to a baby boy with Phu Lam. They name him Elvis.
Really?
I knew you'd love that.
That's pretty funny.
Named him Elvis.
There you go.
3 years later, in 2009, Phu Lam sponsors Tien Truong's mother and father, Thi Dau Lee and Van Dang Truong, and her sister, Thanh Ha Thi Truong. She goes by Ha. She's going to have a daughter of her own in 2009, and this is Tien's sister, and she names her Valentina Nguyen.
Nice.
And even though Phu Lam is bringing all these people to Canada, it's not like he's just got money to burn. He doesn't.
Right.
And on top of that, he's a gambler, a big-time gambler.
Wow.
In fact, in 2013, Phu Lam filed for bankruptcy. The home, which he co-owns with his wife, had a $25,000 writ against it, and he declared bankruptcy in 2013, listing liabilities of $296,000
Jeez.
and assets of only $393,000.
Let me see.
The math speaks for itself.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be less.
That would be less.
Yes. He has
Jeez.
more debts than assets.
Wow.
But his controlling nature and his gambling addiction eventually turned to more than just controlling. It's become violent. And Phu Lam would not only yell and scream at Tien, he would choke her and threaten to kill her and her family if she called the police on him.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Then in 2012, Phu Lam caught wind that his son Elvis might not be his biological child.
Especially when his son was always saying, thank you very much.
Blue. I heard that one a lot this season.
Yes, I love that too.
Blue Christmas, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Nobody can do the like Elvis.
Lord have mercy.
No, it's perfect.
But he doesn't think Elvis is his. So to be certain, he does a DNA test with himself and Elvis. And in November of 2012, Phu Lam confronts Tien Truong and her family with the results.
Uh-oh.
I just had this vision of him holding up this paper in front of them. Look at this.
Yeah. And
Look at this.
And Maury Povich was sitting there with him.
You are not the father.
You are not the father.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
He finds out that Elvis is not his son, not his biological son.
Wow.
He was the child of this friend of her family that she had strayed from Phu Lam to sleep with.
Okay.
And Phu Lam loses his mind on her and her parents, who beg him for forgiveness. And it was kind of an after all I've done for you situation, right? You
Yeah,
know,
sure.
I've brought you over, your sister over, your parents over. After everything I've done for you, this is what you do to me.
Wow.
And he's so angry with her that he starts to physically assault her. Then he sexually assaults her and he chokes her.
Wow.
And Tien's sister, Ha, calls the police. And the police show up and they arrest Phu Lam and they hold him without bail. And Tien Truong's sister, Ha, shows up at the police station the next day just to let him know this is how bad it is.
Right.
Before you let him go, before anything happens, this is how bad it is. And when Tien speaks with the police, she does tell them that he had sexually assaulted and choked her and then threatened to kill the entire family as soon as he had his hands on a gun. So she is granted an emergency protection order. Then in December of 2012, just a month later, Tien Truong and her family recant everything.
Really?
All the allegations.
Why?
Well, after all I've done for you, you know, and Elvis isn't his son, and he
Jeez.
brought everybody over. This is just my opinion.
Yeah.
But they drop it all. And the Crown, which is basically the court in Canada, the Crown has no choice but to drop the charges and the case.
Yeah, because they're saying there is no
Yeah,
case here.
yeah.
Okay.
And the emergency protection order was revoked in January of 2013 when Tien Truong failed to appear at a renewal hearing. And according to her friends, Tien was afraid of Phu and was afraid if she pressed charges, it would make her life more miserable than it already was. So they're trying to patch things up, and they even have another child in the midst of all of this time a daughter. But Phu Lam's life is spiraling out of control. He's in debt up to his eyeballs.
Okay.
And by 2014, he and Tien are fighting like cats and dogs again, and she wants him to move out of the house they share with her parents and her sister on 83rd Street in Edmonton.
All right.
Now, I don't know if it's because she's threatening him. I'm going to go back to the police. I'll tell them everything is true. Don't know.
Yeah.
But at this point, Phu Lam has declared bankruptcy. He had tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, and he'd been going to Gamblers Anonymous. But even more upsetting to him, his wife, Tien Truong, is now seeing another man.
Uh-oh.
His name is Viet Nguyen.
Okay.
On Monday, December 2nd, 2014, it's 2 a.m., and Tien Truong finishes work and heads home, but she's not the only one awake at this hour. Her sister Ha is at the house at 83rd Street. She's texting someone. She's actually estranged from her husband at this point. Okay. And I do want to say that after Tien tells Phu Lam that she wants him out of the house, he actually goes to Vietnam. And the neighbors know that he has gone to Vietnam. But by the beginning of December, the 1st of December, he's back. And he tells his neighbors, when they ask, why are you back? He says, I'm back for divorce papers.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So it's December 29th, 2014. Tien Truong doesn't show up for work that day, and neither did Phu Lam, who was actually doing some maintenance work in the kitchen of a Vietnamese Chinese restaurant called VN Express that's owned by his ex-wife or ex-common law wife, Chow Duong Thai Tran.
And if you can keep all of this straight, you're better than me. Gee whiz.
So far, I think I'm getting the names right. I'm patting myself on the back, but somebody who knows Vietnamese is like, oh my goodness.
Hey, I'm impressed.
She's butchering this.
Yeah. Well, and suddenly I don't feel so bad about my last name.
Podorf.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I doubt the Vietnamese would be able to say that one. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Germans are going to be right on top of it, honey.
It's true. It's true.
But early that morning, Phu Lam did exactly what he said he was going to do. He shows up at the house he owns with Tien Truong, and then they're still asleep because it's kind of the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m.
Okay.
This happens between 3 a.m. and like 6 a.m.
All right.
But everybody in the house is asleep. He lets himself in, and he shoots his wife execution style in the back of the head as she's laying in bed.
Oh, wow.
Then he goes to the bedroom of his 8-year-old son, Elvis,
No.
and he also shoots him in the back of the head as he is asleep in bed.
Oh, jeez.
Then he shoots Tien's sister, Ha. She's in bed. And her little girl, Valentina, also in there, in her bed while they're sleeping.
Wow.
And remember, Ha is estranged from her husband. He is not there. Then using Tien's phone, Phu Lam actually asks her boyfriend, Viet Nguyen, the man she's now been seeing, she asks him to the house. And when he walks in, Phu Lam shoots him in the back of the head and drags him away.
Jeez.
And as far as her parents are concerned, I got 2 stories out of the sources that I read. One said that he also called her parents to the house, and as soon as they walked through the door, he shot each of them in the head. But another source said that they actually were still living there, and he shot them that morning just as he shot everybody else, just not in their bed.
Gotcha.
So now there are 7 dead bodies in this house. But he's not finished. After he lines up 3 of the bodies, his in-laws and his wife's new boyfriend, he lines them up, leaves the other bodies upstairs in their beds. He throws blankets over the pools of blood in the entrance of the house. He lines up these 3 bodies in the living room downstairs. You know, the children are upstairs in bed dead. But remember, there are 2 other small kids in this house because he had a new baby, a little girl, with his wife.
Right.
And Ha had a child as well. So there's a 1-year-old and an 8-month-old in this house.
Oh, no. Wow.
He does not murder these 2 children.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So his and Tien's infant daughter and the 8-month-old, his niece, who belongs to Ha, he spares these babies.
Well, I mean, it sounds like he had some sort of conscience.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness he saved the 2 babies.
Yeah.
At around 10 a.m., he leaves this house. Phu Lam takes the 2 babies he spared to his daughter's house. And his neighbors notice the black SUV in front of the house at 9:45 a.m. And this black SUV, it's a black SUV. It's a Mercedes. It is his wife. It's Tien's car. And the neighbors see this out in front of his house on 83rd Street at 9:45. But just a few minutes later, another neighbor notices that this SUV is gone. So he has left.
All right.
And that sort of jives with the fact that he dropped these babies off at 10 a.m. And when he does drop them off, he tells his daughter as he's leaving, he's really agitated, he's really upset, and she's a little worried about him because he's just not acting like himself.
Sure.
But as he's leaving, he says, quote, "I love you and I may never see you again," end quote.
That would be a clue that something's not right.
Something's up.
Yeah.
Now, after this, Phu Lam's whereabouts are a little murky at this point, but he went to a relative's home to visit in southwest Edmonton late Monday afternoon. Then shortly after 6 p.m., Phu Lam drove to the home of Cyndi Duong and David Liu near Hassel Court and 16th Avenue in southwest Edmonton. This house is just a 12-minute drive from these relatives that he's been visiting with after he's killed his wife's entire family. Yeah.
Jeez.
Including the children.
Man.
So let me tell you about David Liu and his wife, Cyndi Duong.
Cindy Lou.
Cindy, she's not. She's Cyndi Duong. He's David Liu.
Okay.
Cyndi is 37. David is 41. Cyndi and David meet during a New Year's celebration. David's dad was setting off fireworks at his family's store. And Cyndi and her cousin came by to watch the fireworks. And David was smitten from the get-go. And he worked up the courage to walk up to her for a little chat. And Cyndi was a really involved teenager in her church. She also worked at a place, at a Swiss chalet restaurant in West Edmonton. And she and David fall in love. They're married at the Vietnamese Alliance Church that Cyndi's family helped to establish in 1980. Both Cyndi and David came to Canada from Vietnam when their families were young, and they were both very young kids.
Gotcha.
She was a tiny little girl when she made it to Canada.
Okay.
And Cyndi was known as someone with a contagious laugh. She and David went on to have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. She's a hockey mom in Edmonton.
Yeah.
Both of her boys play hockey and soccer. And she worked for a company called Enbridge as a team lead in the regional pipeline supply chain group.
All right.
It's an energy company.
Got it.
And she and David are very much in love. She's really involved in her children's lives. They had this beautiful home on Haswell Court. And Cyndi's highest priority was always her children. And her parents, as well as David's, had left Vietnam for this better life. And Cyndi's parents actually live with her and David. But at the time, New Year's on December 29th, that evening,
Right.
they're back in Vietnam on vacation. So that seems to be a thing to do. They
Sure.
go back to Vietnam like for the holidays.
I'm sure it'd be the same thing for, someone like us if we decided we're going to live in Italy.
We're going to come home to the United States.
Yeah, you want to come home and see friends and family and stuff like that. So I get it.
Yeah. Hard to find fudge in Italy at
Yeah.
Christmas time, maybe.
Exactly.
On December 29th, 2014, just 3 days before the new year, the Lius are all at home together. Dinner was at 5:30, and Cyndi is helping her children with their homework. And just a little before 7, the doorbell rings. And Cyndi and the boys are in the living room with their mom, and the youngest, their daughter, is upstairs with David. And when the bell rings, David and Cyndi's middle child, he's 10 years old, he runs to the door. Doorbell rings.
Yeah.
Who could it be?
Right.
Run to the door to answer. And Cyndi is right behind him. And standing on their front stoop is Phu Lam, a man with nothing to lose and an old grudge against Cyndi's father. He asks for Cyndi's father. He asks, "Where's your grandfather?" to their son. And when Cyndi walks up behind their son, their 10-year-old son, Phu Lam shoots Cyndi in the head right in front of her child, of her little boy.
What an animal.
Then he jumps in Tien's black SUV and he speeds away.
Jeez.
Now, David is upstairs with their daughter. He hears a huge, like a big bang. He runs downstairs. His first thought was that furniture had fallen, like a table had fallen over or a bookcase had fallen.
Right.
And he comes around to the landing on the stairs and he sees his wife, Cyndi, in the floor. And for him, he says it's all a blur. I've seen interviews with him. He says it's all a blur, but his wife has been shot in front of her children.
Ugh.
Now, Inspector Reagan James of the Edmonton Police is on duty that night. He's fresh back from 4 days off over the holiday. He hears over the radio that shots are fired at a home, and he's very close. So he volunteers on the radio, and he drives into this neighborhood that is beautiful, that's all decked out still for Christmas. These are like $700,000 to $1 million homes. It's a very nice neighborhood.
Right.
And he looks through the window because all he knows is that, there's been a shooting, active shooter possibly.
Sure.
So he looks through the window and Inspector James can see a man over a body on the ground. And David opens the front door. He's hysterical. Cindy's on the ground with a gunshot wound to the head. She's turning gray while her children are around her crying. Her eyes are still open. And Inspector James tries to stop the bleeding. David is crying uncontrollably. The police are worried about the kids being in the foyer, and Inspector James doesn't know if someone's coming back to the house to finish the job,
Right.
and he wants the kids out of harm's way.
Sure.
And so he pulls the kids away, paramedics show up, and EMS knows that Cyndi is dying, and according to Inspector James, he could tell from their expression, quote, "I knew she was gone," end quote.
Man, that's tragic.
So David watched his wife, Cyndi, die. And the children, the two boys, watched her murder.
Ugh. How do you get over that?
I don't know. And my heart goes out to this family. My heart goes out to this family.
Yeah.
There was nothing to be done, and David felt hopeless. He felt helpless. And this house is now a crime scene where a murder has occurred.
Right.
And Inspector James starts to ask David, what happened, because the police always look at the spouse.
Sure.
What is David involved in, business-wise or, personally?
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a drug problem? Did he have a gambling problem? And David tells police, he heard a bang. He came around the corner and he saw Cyndi on the floor. And the kids were crying. And when he got to Cyndi, he realized that she'd been shot in the head. Now, their middle child, the one who opens the door, tells police that a man at the door shot Mom. And this is heartbreaking. Quote, "It's my fault I opened the door," end quote.
Jeez.
Yeah. And this middle child, this little boy, has seen everything. And the police are trying to be sensitive, but they're also trying to get information out of this traumatized kid because he saw what happened more than their dad, David, did.
Sure.
Right? So he's the one they have to ask. And this little boy tells him, "Someone came to the door. He was an Asian male. He asked for my grandfather in Vietnamese. And when my mom showed up behind me, he shot her." And this little boy tells police that the man at the door was wearing glasses, he was older, and he left the house after shooting his mother in a dark car. This little kid is the only witness, but he does an amazing job for the police.
And how old is this kid at the time?
He's 10.
Wow. Good for him.
Asian male with glasses and a dark car.
Wow.
And he's Vietnamese because he was speaking in Vietnamese. So Inspector James has all of Southwest Edmonton looking for this dark SUV, this dark car. And authorities believe that Cyndi knew her killer. And they also think that Cyndi was, in fact, the intended target. Well, she wasn't. She was just a substitute target.
Sure.
So police canvass the neighborhood. They're knocking on doors. Neighbors are in shock. It's an affluent neighborhood where random shootings just don't happen. And officers take David and the children to the police station because the house is now an active crime scene. And Inspector James orders a background check on David and Cyndi. They want to look at his associations with others, their financial situation. Was she having an affair? Is this a love triangle? And David seems as though he's completely distraught. He's still the first obvious suspect. They always look at the spouse first.
Sure.
And even though Cyndi is a hockey mom and a soccer mom, you could never assume that there isn't a connection to gangs or drugs or infidelity. And apparently gangs are a real thing in Edmonton, Canada.
Really?
Which surprised me.
Wow.
Yeah. And the police are a little stumped because this murder kind of looks like a vendetta. They're punishing her or her family. Because what does organized crime do? What do bad guys do? They don't come after you. They take away what you love the most.
Exactly.
Usually family or kids. So was this against David, and in retaliation they took his wife?
Right.
So I don't know why they're not listening to the whole "is your grandfather here" part, but they're really trying to cover all their bases.
Sure.
Police sit down with David. They start asking questions. Was your wife having an affair? Did she have a drug problem, a gambling problem? But David tells them he doesn't know what's going on. And he tells police that Cyndi was very well loved, and he had no idea who would want to hurt her or his family. And even though police think it's an out-and-out assassination, David doesn't think it is. and police aren't so sure. So David's like, is this mistaken identity? I have no idea how this could happen. So if you're just an average all-American family,
Clearly Canadian.
it's right before New Year's, your house is all lit up for Christmas still, there's snow on the ground, you're working in the house with your kids on their homework after dinner, and the doorbell rings, and you open it, and someone's suddenly shot.
Mm-hmm.
And David's just like, it doesn't fit. It doesn't work with us. It doesn't work with our family.
Right.
So authorities started ticking through some of the gang activity in Edmonton. But like I said, they do have gang problems.
Right.
And so they didn't know if it was, like a gang-related,
Sure.
initiation.
Yeah.
But they do this background check on David, and it comes back clean, as does the background check on Cyndi.
Okay.
And I hope David was like, I told you so. I told you so.
Yeah.
But the manhunt is on, and they're looking for someone who's armed and dangerous. And then, just a few hours into the investigation, Edmonton police get another 911 call at 8:28 p.m. So she is shot at 6:50, basically. And at 8:30, they get another 911 call, and the police are called to yet another Vietnamese family's home. It's a young woman who hasn't been able to get in touch with her father, 53-year-old Phu Lam. She can't get in touch with her dad or any other family member, and she's worried because her dad dropped off his young child and his niece, and she thinks maybe he's suicidal because he was saying to her as he's leaving, I love you, I may never see you again.
Right. Wow.
Now, a different inspector, Inspector Sergeant McCormick, makes a welfare check at this house. And here's what they know from the daughter. Phu Lam lives with his second wife, 35-year-old Tien Truong, and the 8-year-old son that they share, Elvis, along with a 1-year-old daughter. They tell them that the parents also live there.
Mm-hmm.
So officers arrive at this Lakeview home near 83rd Street and 180th Avenue, but they didn't find Phu Lam. There was no response, and, quote, nothing suspicious was noted at the residence. So they knock on the door.
Yeah.
They knock on Phu Lam's door, this house he shares with his wife
Right.
and her parents and sister. There's no answer, and the police turn around and leave.
Ooh.
So that was their check.
Yeah.
But Phu Lam's daughter is adamant. She calls back again. And they go back to Phu Lam's house at 12:23 a.m. Meanwhile, David, Lou, and his children have been put under police protection, and they're housed at a hotel with a guard outside.
Okay.
And David has said that nobody slept. So one inspector is out. They've got an APB out looking for this black or this dark SUV.
Right.
And then another group of them has shown back up again at Phu Lam's house because the daughter is adamant that something is hinky, something's up.
Sure.
So Sergeant McCormick walks around the outside of the house first because he knocks and nobody answers.
Right.
He walks around the outside of the house and he finds a set of fresh footprints in the snow from that night. And in one of the footprints, there's a red stain. And at first they don't know if it's blood or not, but it gives them even more reason to keep investigating. Now, I just want to say the Canadian police and the American police, United States police, completely different. Because now they're worried that someone on the inside of the house is injured. Where in the United States would be like, we've got blood outside, knock down the door, we're going in.
Exactly.
But Sergeant McCormick calls Inspector James to tell him that they've found this footprint with blood. And it's at this point they realize that 2 Vietnamese families might have been hit in the same night. Now, they're not making the connection between these 2 families at all.
Right.
But Inspector James, after being with David Lou and his family, goes to Phu Lam's house. And at first, authorities didn't know if they should enter the house, which is so interesting to me because, like I said, in the States, I think they just would have knocked down the door.
Yeah.
Because police can force entry when they have a reasonable suspicion of danger,
Right.
meaning the police must have a legitimate reason to believe somebody inside is in imminent danger. And they can't do it if they just think or they feel like there's a general feeling of unease.
But I think blood in a freshly imprinted footprint would give. Okay.
That would be enough.
Yeah.
So there's the knock and announce rule, which means even in an emergency situation, police are required to announce their presence before entering unless they believe doing so would put them or others at risk.
Right.
And examples of situations that justified forced entry would be hearing sounds of a violent altercation, witnessing someone fleeing into a residence while being pursued, receiving a report of a potential hostage situation, or the belief that evidence is being destroyed inside.
Okay.
Now, these are the Canadian rules, not the American rules.
Right.
And while police are contemplating whether they should enter this house, there's yet another 911 call. And it's another Vietnamese man who is worried about his wife, his estranged wife. It's Ha's husband, Tien's sister. Remember, she's estranged from her husband.
Right.
And he says the two of them had a family fight and he hadn't spoken to his wife in over 2 days. And what they learn immediately is that this woman, his wife, and his 3-year-old daughter were staying at Phu Lam's house. So they're standing outside Phu Lam's house.
Right.
And they get this 911 call. And this is when they decide to go in.
All the pieces are starting to come together.
Yeah. Inspector James enters the house. He was going to pick the lock, which I also thought was very polite because once again, in the United States, they would knock the door down.
Exactly.
Yeah. But he was going to pick the lock, but he tries the doorknob and it opens. It was unlocked. The door was unlocked. So they've been walking around this house and looking in the windows and all this stuff, and nobody tried the front door. Again, I think it's interesting because they didn't do that. Yeah.
Right.
They didn't even see if it was locked. Right. Not judging. I just find it interesting the way different countries work crime.
Right.
But Inspector James took one step into Phu Lam's home and yelled back to the entry team, quote, "It's bad," end quote. And it is. It's a bloodbath. In the front entrance, there are blankets soaking up puddles of blood. There's blood spatter, there's brain matter, and blood everywhere. It's on the walls. And there were smear marks on the tile floor where someone has been dragged or possibly dragged themselves away from the scene. Also in the floor are shell casings from an automatic weapon. So this team ventures into the living room where they find 3 bodies lined up. And it was evident that they'd been dead for some time. So these 3 bodies are lined up in the living room. Police go up the stairs thinking that maybe the killer is still there. So their whole team splits up and they're clearing the house. And one turns the corner into a bedroom and finds a boy in bed with a bullet in the back of his head. It's Elvis.
Jeez.
This little 8-year-old boy, it just kills me.
Yeah.
So one of the police officers shouts, "I have number 4. So there are 3 bodies downstairs. Elvis is number 4. Another police team, they clear another separate bedroom. They find body number 5, a female. It's Phu Lam's wife, Tien Truong. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
They found body number 6 and 7, which is her sister and her daughter, Valentina. All had holes in the back of their head.
Man.
They're all face down. They're all covered up. It's crazy.
Yeah.
They phoned the chief of police. It's the largest murder scene they've ever encountered. Is the shooter among the dead? Is there someone with a gun in their hand? So they start looking through these bodies, and there isn't.
Right.
And 3 of the bodies were moved based on the drag marks on the tile floor. They think they've been shot and killed in the entrance, and once they've been murdered at different times as they entered the home. So now they're thinking maybe this happened over a period of time. And they ID the victims in the house using photos from Phu Lam's daughter, the woman who called twice to say something's up with my dad.
Yeah.
So upstairs in the house is Tien Truong and Elvis, and Tien's sister Ha and her daughter Valentina. Downstairs, the 3 bodies are the in-laws of Phu Lam and another Vietnamese male, 41-year-old Viet Nguyen, her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Tien Truong's boyfriend.
Right.
He's the only victim who's not related to the family. But Phu Lam isn't there. He's a person of interest. Could he be the killer? What was the possible motive? Why shoot members of your own family? And are these murders connected to Cyndi Duong? So they canvass the neighborhood and they learn something interesting, that Phu Lam's wife has a dark Mercedes SUV that she drives, and that car is gone.
Right.
So now they realize, could this possibly be the same dark car that Cindy's son ID'd?
Right.
So they were already out looking for this car on the road, but now they're really looking for it. Every single police officer on patrol is looking for this car. And one of her neighbors tells police that this Mercedes has a personalized plate. So one of Phu Lam's neighbors tells police, this dark SUV has a personalized plate. It says Elvis TT. It's ELV number 1 STT. So it's personalized for the son.
Okay.
Now, Phu Lam's daughter is questioned. She starts sharing who her dad really is. She's very vocal about the interactions in the house. She says that Phu Lam and his wife would fight like crazy, and that Phu Lam got no emotional or financial support for bringing this family over to Canada. And she tells police that leading up to the holidays, Phu Lam and his wife, Tien, are fighting, and she wants him to move out. And she says that her father, Phu Lam, feels like he's lost his family. Not to mention, Tien Truong had started seeing Viet Nguyen, her new boyfriend.
Sounds like motive.
Yeah, so, I mean, Phu Lam, I'm not defending him, but his life has gone to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
And he's like, my wife now has a new boyfriend who's hanging out inside my house.
Right.
Which I'm going to lose, by the way, because I'm in debt up to my eyeballs.
Right.
So now the police are like, we got to find Phu Lam. And they look into his background and find out that he's in debt up to $500,000. But what they really find out is that there were allegations of physical and sexual abuse, and that Tien Truong had taken out an emergency protection order. And Phu Lam didn't think that Elvis was his child. So they're finding all this stuff out about the DNA testing, and he didn't think that Elvis was his child, and he shows the DNA test to the family, and they're begging him to forgive her and them, right?
Yep.
And that he started to choke her, and her sister called the police. So this is all in this police report. And they also see that Phu Lam has threatened to buy a gun and come back and kill them all. But shortly before the new year, Tien had dropped the case against her estranged husband. Right. So police are like looking through all of this stuff, and they're figuring it out little by little. They also find out that Tien was afraid of Phu and that he would make her life miserable. So police are looking at this whole thing. There's 7 dead bodies in Phu Lam's house. But how does it connect to Cyndi Duong? And they show David Liu a photo of Phu Lam. And he's like, I have no idea who this guy is. We don't know him. But they start to get pings from Phu Lam's phone from the cell towers. And they can see where he is. He's in Fort Saskatchewan, which is near Edmonton, just 16 miles east, at a Vietnamese Chinese restaurant. He's at the restaurant that his first wife, his common-law wife, owns, where he had been working in the kitchen on maintenance things.
Okay.
So police officers are on their way. They're following this ping. And they can, when they arrive, they can see this black SUV is there in front of the restaurant, and there's no snow on it. It is not frosted over. The car is still warm. This is where he's worked in the kitchen repairing stuff.
Right.
And they pull out the SWAT team. The helicopters are in the air. It's the full Monty.
Wow.
There were people who were on the scene, citizens who were on the scene, who said that there were robots and dogs.
Jeez.
So they go from not trying the front door to see if it's open to robots and dogs.
Yeah.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So they do escalate quickly, I will say this.
Right.
So they're shouting into this restaurant. They're trying to talk to Phu Lam. He's not answering his phone. He's not answering the call-outs. He's not coming to the window to check on them. So the tactical team goes into the building because they know they've cornered him.
Right.
It's now December 30th in the early morning hours. And they have this standoff. But they enter the restaurant ultimately. And when they do, they find Phu Lam.
And?
He's on the ground with a single self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
Coward.
Yeah, the gun he used on his family and Cyndi, he killed himself. It was a 9mm handgun that matched all the shell casings. It was reported stolen in 2006 and registered in British Columbia. So he had somehow gotten his hands on a gun that was stolen.
Wow.
But why would Phu Lam kill Cyndi? This is the police.
Right.
And what they discover is that he had this old grudge against Cyndi's father, who wasn't even there that night, who was in Vietnam on the night that he came to Cyndi and David's house.
Wow.
So countless lives lost, including 2 children, not to mention the 3 Liu children who are permanently scarred. The middle child, the little boy who opened the door, blamed himself for his mother's death. And for years, according to David Liu, he had to accompany his little boy everywhere he went. The little boy had to have his dad in his sights. He wouldn't go to the bathroom alone. He wouldn't shower alone.
Jeez.
He couldn't be alone, which totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what a tragic story. And what a coward of a person to kill everyone and then himself.
Yeah.
And poor Cyndi is just caught in the chaos.
Yeah.
A completely innocent family just caught in the chaos.
Yeah.
And I think he believed, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going down.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill myself. They're going to find all these bodies. Who else has wronged me?
Yep.
So he went to Cyndi and David's house, looking for her dad, thinking, I'm going to settle an old score and then I'll be done.
Wow.
And she was just caught in the chaos of it all. But that is the story of the Edmonton New Year's nightmare. And that's all I have to say about that.
You know, I don't know what's more amazing about this case is the fact that he just killed his entire family.
Yeah.
Or the fact that you got through that whole thing pronouncing all those names. That's what's amazing to me.
Well, we think. I can only hope. I can only hope.
But seriously, that's just such a sad, tragic story.
It is. It's a tragic story. I just feel so terrible for David Liu and his children.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, those kids, I mean, how do you get through that as a 10-year-old?
Not to mention Tien and Ha, she and her sister. I mean, you know, there was a 1-year-old and an 8-month-old who were spared.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were too young to really know or be a part of it or really know their family, but they have that legacy, you know, attached to them, which that's hard. Nobody deserves that. No. Nobody deserves any of that.
No. Well, let's move away from that insanity to a little stupid insanity with Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number 1, I'm calling Burrito Patrol.
Burrito?
Uh-huh. Burrito. Okay. Aiden Juarez Ramirez, yes, had it all figured out.
I like how you always roll your R's when you do your Spanish.
It's habit, you know. Okay. Aiden Juarez Ramirez had it all figured out. He could be a cop without having to take the boring test. But he was arrested in Grapevine, Texas, after pulling over a driver in his pickup truck outfitted with flashing lights.
Oh, my gosh.
He even had an ID badge, which he'd made by blacking out a restaurant gift card and etching in the word police.
Believable.
Yep. However, he kept the restaurant's logo, a jalapeno pepper, surrounded by the words Chipotle Mexican Grill. Didn't quite work out for him.
That's too good.
Okay, number 2, the lowest high there is.
The lowest high. Okay.
For a trio of drug thieves, it was their lucky day.
Okay.
They broke into a Silver Springs, Florida home and discovered 3 jars of cocaine. They took it home and snorted the contents. That's when they discovered that the jars were in fact urns. Now, we've done a story like this before, but this one's a little different. Were in fact urns, and that they were snorting the cremation of the victim's husband and
her pets.
Their dogs.
Yeah. I've heard this story before. I've read this one. Can you imagine? You think you've hit the jackpot?
Oh,
and you've just snorted somebody's ashes up your nose?
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, and finally, and this is another candy one, but it's still good. Next time, steal a Milky Way, all right?
Okay.
When Stephen Crane broke into the Ravelli Republic, Montana, newsroom, he used computers to watch porn and check Facebook. Then Crane doused the office with a fire extinguisher, took some candy, and left. But it wasn't difficult to find him. However, the police just followed a trail of stolen M&Ms that led to a sister's place across the way.
Wait a minute. This is like E.T., where he's like picking up the Reese's Pieces.
That's it.
Is he a pig? He sure eats like one.
Yeah, just left a little trail, no problem. So there's your stupid criminals, and bless your heart.
That is too good. Too good. I love it. One little side note.
Yeah.
If you see somebody with a flashing light and you think it's suspicious,
Yeah.
call the police and tell them,
Absolutely.
do not pull over.
Yep.
Do not pull over. We've had a couple of true crime cases that began that way. So
Yeah.
you never want to pull over.
Especially if they have a badge that has the Chipotle.
Yeah, if it's an unmarked car, or even if it is a marked car and you don't want to pull over right there,
Yeah.
you can call 911 and tell them he's following me. This is what my car looks like, and I'm driving to this location before I pull over, and they will let the police officer know
Right.
that you're just trying to be safe.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So don't forget that. Don't forget that.
Important safety tip.
That's an important safety tip for 2025.
There you go.
There you go. Well, we're so glad you were with us again today in the new year. That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.